The nurse finished her last shift. Then Seals arrived and called her ma'am. Eleanor Whitfield had worked 38 years in that hospital, and she planned to leave the same way she had lived most of her life, quietly, without a fuss. She had asked the charge nurse, Donna, not to make a big deal of it. No speeches, no announcements over the intercom. A small cake in the break room was fine. That was more than enough. Donna had agreed with the kind of smile that meant she was going to do exactly what she wanted anyway, which was also fine. Nell had learned a long time ago that some things were simply beyond your control, and a sheet cake with your name on it was one of them. The final shift was a Tuesday night, which suited her. Tuesdays were rarely dramatic. A few minor injuries, a respiratory case in Bay 3, an elderly man with chest pain who turned out to have pulled a muscle raking his yard. Nell moved through it all the way she always had, efficiently, gently, without wasted motion. The younger nurses watched her sometimes, not because she was showy, but because she was the opposite of showy, and there was something instructive in that. Priya Nair, the newest member of the night team, had been watching Nell all week, with the quiet intensity of someone trying to memorize something before it disappeared. She was 26, sharp, and still in that early stage of nursing, where every shift felt like being tested by a force larger than herself. Nell reminded her to breathe. Not metaphorically, literally. "You're holding your breath again," Nell would say, passing her in the corridor, not even breaking stride. Around 11:30, when the ward had settled into its nighttime rhythm, Priya followed Nell to the small staff area beside the supply closet, where Nell kept her personal locker. She watched Nell gather her things slowly, the way a person does when they are not quite ready to leave a place, even when leaving is exactly the right thing to do. On the inside of the locker door, taped carefully, was an old photograph. Priya had noticed it before, but had never asked about it. Tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the last chance. "Who are those men?" Priya asked. Nell looked at the photograph for a moment before answering. In it, a much younger version of herself stood with a group of men in a dry, dusty landscape. She was wearing fatigues. The men around her were laughing at something outside the frame. She was not laughing, but she was smiling, and it was a different smile from the one Priya knew. Looser, less guarded. "Old friends," Nell said. "Were you in the military?" Nell pulled the photograph carefully from the tape and tucked it into the front pocket of her bag. "For a while," she said. "A long time ago." Priya wanted to ask more, but something in the way Nell closed her locker door, final, deliberate, suggested the subject was closed with it. They walked back together toward the break room, where Donna had indeed set up the cake, along with 3 silver balloons and a card signed by everyone on the floor, including Dr. Beaumont, who rarely signed anything that wasn't a prescription. The small gathering was warm and genuine. People said kind things. Someone brought a cheese dip that nobody admitted to liking, but everyone kept eating. Nell accepted a plastic cup of sparkling cider and thanked them all simply and honestly, without performing humility or feigning surprise. She had always been exactly who she was, in every room she entered, and she was that person now. It was almost 1 in the morning when the doors at the front of the ER slid open. Donna noticed them first, because she happened to be at the front desk. 4 men walked in together. They were dressed in ordinary civilian clothes, jeans, plain jackets, but there was nothing ordinary about the way they moved. They came through the door in a loose formation without discussing it, their eyes moving across the room in a calm, practiced sweep. They were not large in a showy way, but they were solid, and they carried themselves with the particular stillness of people who had spent time in very loud, very dangerous places, and had learned that stillness was a form of power. The one in front was younger than the others, perhaps 30. He approached the desk. "We're looking for Petty Officer Whitfield," he said. "Eleanor Whitfield. We were told she works nights here." Donna blinked. "We have a Nell Whitfield. She's a nurse." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That's her." Donna paged Nell to the front desk, unsure of what else to do. The 4 men waited without fidgeting, without checking their phones, without making small talk. Priya, passing by with a chart, slowed down, and then stopped entirely, without quite meaning to. Nell appeared from the corridor, still holding her cider cup. She saw them, and she went still. The color did not drain from her face so much as rearrange itself. Something shifted behind her eyes, recognition, and with it, something older and more complicated. The younger man stepped forward. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, "my name is Marcus Ruiz. My father was Daniel Ruiz." The cup in Nell's hand lowered very slowly until her arm was at her side. "I know who your father is," she said quietly. "Was," Marcus said, and his voice was steady but careful. "He passed last year, March." Nell closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she nodded once. "I didn't know," she said. "I'm sorry. He was sick for a while, but it wasn't sudden. He had time to get things in order." Marcus paused. "He left letters. A lot of them. He wrote about a lot of things. And he wrote about you." One of the other men, older, with gray at his temples and a jaw like a shelf, stepped forward and extended his hand. "Petty Officer Whitfield, Tom Garrett. I was on the team." Nell shook his hand. Her own hand was steady. "I remember you," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I imagine you do." There was a small conference room adjacent to the ER waiting area, used mostly for difficult conversations with families. Someone, probably Donna, reading the room, had quietly opened it and turned on the light. The six of them moved there without anyone suggesting it out loud. They sat around the table, and Priya stood near the door, unsure if she was meant to stay. Nell glanced at her once, and didn't ask her to leave, which Priya understood as permission. Marcus laid a folded letter on the table and a small object beside it. The object was a pair of military dog tags on a simple chain. He did not push them across the table yet. He spoke first. "My father talked about the operation sometimes," he said. "Not often, not with details, but he talked about the woman who stayed." He looked at Nell directly. "He said when the call came to move, when the helicopter was there and there wasn't room for everyone, you chose to stay behind with him. He said you were the only reason he made it through the night." Nell said nothing. Tom Garrett leaned forward. "That's accurate," he said simply. "We were extracted under pressure. Danny was critical. The decision was made above all of our heads, and it wasn't a good one, and we've lived with that. She had a seat. She gave it up." He paused. "She kept him alive in a ditch for 4 hours, until we got back to him." "We were not supposed to talk about any of it," said another man at the table, introducing himself only as Ray. "The operation was classified, still mostly is. She was discharged quietly. No record of what she did. No commendation. Nothing official." He looked at Nell, which was wrong, and which we've all known was wrong for a long time. Nell set her cider cup down on the table. "I didn't do it for recognition," she said. Her voice was even and unhurried. "Danny was my patient. You don't leave your patient." "No," said Tom. "You don't, but most people do, when the helicopter is right there." Silence settled over the room. "He named me after someone," Marcus said. "He told me when I was 12. There was a soldier in a book I was reading, a character who gave something up for someone else, and I thought it was just a story. And my dad said that kind of thing is real, and that he owed his life to someone like that." He paused. "He told me the full story when I was in college. He said he wanted me to know what it meant to live a life worth someone else's sacrifice." Marcus looked at his hands for a moment. "I spent 8 months finding you after he died. He asked me to. He made me promise." Nell was quiet for a long time. "How old was he when he passed?" she asked. 61, Marcus said. She nodded slowly, doing the math she already knew. He had been 23 when she stayed behind with him in that ditch. She had been 25. "He was a good man," she said. It was not a question. "He was the best man I've ever known," Marcus said without hesitation. The letter on the table was handwritten, several pages, the paper soft from handling. Marcus slid it toward her, but said she didn't have to read it now, or ever, if she didn't want to. The dog tags beside it had Danny's name stamped into them. Ruiz, Daniel A., his blood type, his religion, the small, vital facts that identified a person in the worst circumstances. "He wanted you to have them," Marcus said. "He said they belonged to the person who earned them that night more than anyone." Nell picked up the dog tags carefully. She held them in her palm and looked at them the way you look at something you never expected to see again and weren't sure you deserved to. In 38 years of nursing, the people around the hospital had never seen Eleanor Whitfield cry. Not during the impossible shifts, Not after the losses that shake even experienced nurses. Not even tonight, at her own retirement party, when Donna had given a small speech that was genuinely touching and made two of the other nurses tear up. She cried now. It was not dramatic. There were no sobs. Her face didn't collapse, but her eyes filled, and the tears came down, and she didn't wipe them away immediately, which was somehow more honest than anything she could have said. Priya, near the door, felt something shift in her understanding of what the photograph in the locker had been, and who the woman who kept it really was. Tom Garrett, across the table, cleared his throat quietly. Ray looked at the wall. The fourth man, who had not spoken at all, simply nodded at her, slowly, in the way that people nod when there are no words that are large enough. Marcus reached across and put his hand briefly over Nell's. He wanted you to know that the life you saved was a good one, he said. That was the thing he most wanted you to know. Nell pressed her lips together and breathed. Tell me about him, she said. Tell me what his life was like. And Marcus did. He talked about his father for 20 minutes, the small restaurant Danny had opened in San Diego, the way he coached Little League badly but enthusiastically, the dance at Marcus's wedding, where Danny had embarrassed everyone including himself, the garden he kept in his last years. Nell listened to all of it with her full attention, the same attention she had given Patience for nearly 4 decades, the kind that makes a person feel they are the only thing that matters in the room. When Marcus finished, Nell thanked him. She said it plainly and directly, without ceremony. Thank you for finding me, and thank you for making the trip. It means more than I can explain. They stood. There were handshakes, and from Tom Garrett, something closer to a bow, a brief, respectful inclination of his head that carried the weight of someone acknowledging a debt they could not fully repay. Back in the corridor, Donna had held everyone together with cups of coffee and the remains of the cheese dip. Nobody had left. They had all, somehow, understood that something significant was happening in that small conference room and that they should wait. Nell walked back into the break room and looked at her colleagues, people who had worked beside her for years without knowing this piece of her. She didn't explain it to them. She didn't summarize or make a speech. She simply said, "I'm ready to head home," and picked up her bag. But before she turned to go, she opened her bag and found the photograph. She held it for a moment, then tucked it into her jacket pocket, close to her. Then she took Danny Ruiz's dog tags and fastened the chain around her neck. She reached for her hospital badge, the one that said Eleanor Whitfield, RN, with her photo from 15 years ago when her hair was longer, and held it for a moment. Then she walked to the front desk and set it down gently on the counter. 38 years, turned in without ceremony. Outside in the parking lot, the 4 men were waiting. Not because they had planned it, simply because it felt right to see her out. They formed a loose half-circle as she pushed through the doors, and for a moment, they all just stood in the cool night air together, the way soldiers stand at the end of a long watch, tired, and still, and relieved. Nell looked at them. She breathed in the night air. "You didn't have to come all this way," she said. "Yes, ma'am," said Tom Garrett, with complete certainty. "We did." She smiled then, that looser, less guarded smile from the photograph, the one that belonged to the person she was before she decided to be invisible. She walked to her car. Marcus walked beside her. The others followed a few steps behind, naturally, without instruction. She unlocked the door, tossed her bag into the passenger seat, and turned to face them one last time. "Tell me he danced terribly," she said. Marcus laughed, a real full laugh, surprised out of him. "The worst dancer I have ever seen in my life," he said. "Absolutely no rhythm whatsoever." Nell nodded, satisfied. "Good," she said. "That's exactly what I hoped for." She got in the car, and she drove home. The dog tags rested against her chest, warm from her hands. She didn't turn the radio on. The quiet was enough. The quiet was, in fact, everything she had needed for a very long time.